Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Paul Jay in Baltimore, and welcome to this week's edition of the Machon Report with Anaie Machon, who now joins us from Germany. Anaie was an intelligence officer for the UK's MI5 in the 1990s, but she left after blowing the whistle on incompetence and crimes of British spy agencies. She's also a director of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, or LEAP in Europe, and she's a writer and political commentator. Thanks for joining us again, Anaie.
My pleasure.
So what story have you been following recently?
Well, this is something that's been in the UK media for a while now, the interlinkage between top politicians and media proprietors and corrupt relations between police officers and politicians and the media. And this is leading to a big trial against a number of political and also media figures, including Rebecca Brooks, who used to be the editor of a national newspaper in the UK. And this has resulted in a big judicial inquiry, which has produced something called the Leveson Report, investigating exactly how this corruption occurs. And this is an area that I've been very interested in for many years. First of all, I come from a journalistic family anyway, and was always brought up to believe that the press should hold power to account. Then I ended up working as an intelligence officer for MI5 in the UK, and then ended up, after that, blowing the whistle, going public about a whole series of crimes that the UK intelligence agencies had committed. And this resulted in a number of trials, a number of arrests, and also massive spin in the media against the whistleblowers. So for many years now, I've been watching stories about how spin can be managed, about how the intelligence agencies and the spies can control the media. So the Leveson Report has laid bare the connections between politics and police and the intelligence agencies. And it sort of, I think, confirms for many people across the world, it's very difficult to trust the mainstream media these days because they know that there are these sort of mechanisms going on in the background. However, because of my experience as a whistleblower, my experience as a researcher and speaker since, I think I've got quite a good handle on exactly how those levers of control are used against the mainstream media across the West. And this is a subject that I've been speaking about across Europe at investigative journalism conferences. And always after these talks, the journalists will come up to me and say, it's at least as bad as you've been talking about. So I'd just like to set out really a few key areas in the way that governments and the intelligence agencies can control the mainstream media and why that we should not trust them implicitly, especially after they have allowed intelligence to be politicized and that intelligence to be used and abused to take us into wars, illegal wars in the Middle East.
Well, is there some evidence that...
So in the UK...
Sorry, is there some evidence that what's happened in the UK with the Murdoch-owned newspaper and such, that's going to be portrayed, I guess, as if it's an anomaly, this one situation out of control. But is there evidence that it's actually more systematic than that?
Very much so. I mean, virtually every newspaper in the UK has been implicated in the dubious practices that have been revealed about the Murdoch empire and News of the World. And the way it works is that journalists in the mainstream media now have no job security. They now rely on briefings from government or the intelligence agencies or sort of police officers or whatever to get stories. And once they get those stories, they are expected to publish them uncritically. Otherwise, they don't get the next story and they can't then keep their job and earn a living. So they become these sort of stooges of the spin machine. But it can get worse because if you are particularly pliant as a journalist in the mainstream media, then you might be asked to do more and become what is known as an agent of influence, where you then report back to the police or you report back to the government or to the spy agencies about the stories your media organisation may be investigating. So you're actually snitching.
Right. One of the things I know from the Canadian experience, when CSIS was formed, which is essentially the Canadian Spy Agency, there was a Royal Commission that led to it, and it had various recommendations. And I remember clearly that there was a specific recommendation, I believe this was in the 1970s by memory, that CSIS should make sure that it actually had people in the various newsrooms across the country, that it should try to have at least one paid informant in every newsroom. Have you come across things like this?
I have indeed. I mean, there was a similar operation in the US. I think it was called Operation Mockingbird. But in the UK, particularly, within MI6, which is the external intelligence gathering agency, the sort of James Bond wannabes, they have a little department which used to be called Information Operations, which is there specifically to plant stories in the media, even fake stories, in order to gain a political advantage or to manipulate the spin of a story. So this happens time and time again. So there's a whole sort of array of soft power that spies can use against the media in order to control their media profile. So you have people being planted with stories, you have people reporting back to the spies, you have cozy lunches and interconnections between various agencies and the media. And then you also have this department in the UK, IOPS, which plants fake stories in order to manipulate the perception. So it goes across a whole array of different methods. That's the sort of soft power in the UK. The hard power, so the carrot and the stick bit, is where they start using a battery of laws to protect government and spies and the military and the police. And I think the UK is probably the least accountable and most legally protected of all Western democracies when it comes to this. There's a whole range of laws, starting with injunctions, super injunctions, government injunctions, libel laws, terrorist laws, whatever, that can be used against journalists trying to do their job. But the worst one is the Official Secrets Act from 1989. And this makes it a crime for a whistleblower to report crimes committed by the spies or by the military or by government. But it also makes it a crime for the journalist to report it. They can get 2 years in prison for exposing crimes up to and including murder committed by these people. So they are very, very protected by this battery of laws, and it has a very chilling effect on democracy.
And I guess you add to that the extensive electronic surveillance now, which more or less every phone call, every email and such is being vacuumed up and looked for for keywords, and they can do specific spying when they want to rather easily now. And I suppose journalists are well aware every time they pick up the phone, everything being said is no longer confidential.
I think they're very aware of the problem. They're just not very aware of what they can do about it. And that's where the intersection between the sort of hacktivist community and the journalist community is growing. So, for example, if you have first contact with a potential whistleblower coming out of central government or the spy agencies, the pushback from those agencies potentially can be very severe, life-changing for both the whistleblower and the journalist. And ensuring that sort of degree of safety can be very difficult. I've just been involved in helping to set up a new organisation in the UK called Whistleblowers UK. And these are exactly the ideas and processes we've been trying to thrash out. So it is very difficult in the surveillance society for a journalist to get a good whistleblower and to protect that whistleblower adequately. And this is why I think organisations, the methodology of organisations like WikiLeaks has been so valuable now. The idea that a whistleblower can retain a degree of control by leaking information and then deciding, do they want to go public about it? Do they want to sort of turn their lives inside out by fighting the cause around this information? But WikiLeaks has changed the playing field for most mainstream media. And I think if I were a whistleblower now, sitting behind my desk in MI5, I would think long and hard about how I would do it, and I would probably be tempted to go to WikiLeaks because there would be a sense that you retain control and at least your information will get out there. A lot of the mainstream media can act as a sort of self-censoring blockage of information between those who know information that's important and those who need to know that important information, which is the citizenry, so they can make informed decisions.
Right.
So it's a very difficult world now. I mean, it's great that there's more and more independent media, not the sort of corporatist media that so many people distrust. So the Real News Network is making a great contribution to it.
Well, thanks, and I'd like to also talk to anyone who might be listening to any of my phone calls or any of the work we're doing at the Real News. I hope you're not getting too bored. You're welcome to listen in because it's not going to stop us. We don't really have anything to hide, and you can actually see everything on the Real News Network anyway. Thanks very much for joining us, Anaie.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on the Real News Network, those of you who are watching and those of you who are just kind of listening in.